What made a guarded cowboy stop on a moonlit Montana road and offer a fleeing woman the one thing she had never known, a home she could choose? Hoofbeats cracked through the darkness. Abigail pressed into the brush, her cheek still burning, her mother's locket clenched in one fist. A black horse stopped in the road. The cowboy swung down, held out the reins, and quietly said, "Come home with me." But why did Jeremiah Wilson already fear his name? "Stay with us, and tell me where you're watching from." By late afternoon, the heat had settled over the Owens ranch like a heavy blanket no wind could lift. Dust hung above the cattle pens. The boards of the porch had gone hot enough to sting through thin shoes, and somewhere beyond the south fence a loose gate hinge complained every time the breeze moved it. Abigail Owens stood at the kitchen stove with one hand wrapped around a wooden spoon. She was 23 years old, and she had learned to read her father's moods better than most ranchers read the sky. A cup placed too carefully on a table, a door closed without being slammed, a voice that suddenly became quiet. Those were the warnings. That morning had already given her enough of them. Now Abel Owens came through the kitchen doorway, broad through the shoulders, his shirt dark with sweat from the yard. He poured water from the pitcher, drank half the cup, and set it down with deliberate care. "Jeremiah Wilson's coming for supper." Abigail kept stirring the beans. "I heard you." "Make the cornbread proper this time." She turned then. "Why is he coming?" Her father looked at her as though the question itself had irritated him. "Because a man ought to eat with the woman he's going to marry." For a moment the kitchen seemed to lose every sound except the low hiss of the stove. Abigail set the spoon down. "I never agreed to marry Jeremiah Wilson." Abel's face did not change. That frightened her more than shouting ever had. "You're living under my roof." "That doesn't make my life yours to trade." His jaw tightened. "Your mother filled your head with too many ideas. Mama taught me I belong to myself." The blow came fast enough to knock her shoulder against the counter. A tin cup fell and rolled beneath the table. Abigail caught herself. She did not cry. She tasted blood where she'd bitten the inside of her cheek, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and looked at him. Abel pointed toward the stove. "Finish supper." Then he walked out. Abigail listened until his boots crossed the porch and disappeared into the yard. Only then did she bend for the tin cup. Her hands shook, not from weakness, from the effort of keeping herself exactly where she stood. Jeremiah Wilson arrived just before sundown in a clean gray coat, polished boots, and a wagon that looked too fine for the rutted Owens Road. At 41, he carried himself like a man accustomed to agreements being settled before he entered the room. He pulled Abigail's chair out for her. She sat because refusing would only move the fight forward by a few minutes. "You look well tonight," Jeremiah said. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson." "Jeremiah, we won't need formality much longer." Across the table, Abel poured whiskey. Abigail watched the amber line rise in Jeremiah's glass. Jeremiah talked about his ranch, his cattle, the new fencing going in along the western creek. Then, with the same tone he might have used to discuss lumber, he spoke about Abigail's future. "A woman does better when she knows where home is." Abigail lifted her eyes. "And who decides that?" Jeremiah smiled faintly. "A sensible woman usually recognizes what's best for her." "My best life isn't something you get to choose." The smile vanished. Abel put his glass down. "Go to your room." Abigail held her father's gaze. Then she stood and left before the quiet in his voice became anything worse. Behind her bedroom wall, the men's conversation carried after supper. Most of it came low and indistinct. Then she heard Jeremiah clearly. 2 weeks is soon, Abel answered. 2 weeks is enough. Abigail sat on the edge of the bed. 2 weeks, not someday. Not a threat meant to frighten her into obedience. A date. She looked toward the window. Moonlight had begun whitening the yard beyond the glass. For years, she had imagined leaving. That night, imagination stopped being enough. After the house went quiet, Abigail knelt beside the bed and pried up the loose floorboard. Beneath it lay everything she had managed to keep from Abel, her mother's small brass locket, a hunting knife, and $3.40 wrapped in a faded handkerchief. 2 years of saved coins. She put the locket around her neck, tucked the money into her pocket, and pushed the window upward. Warm night air came through carrying dust, sage, and the faint smell of cattle. The sill caught the hem of her dress as she climbed through. She dropped into the yard. For 1 second she stood beneath the moon and looked at the dark house behind her. Then she turned north. Cutter's Creek lay 12 miles away. Abigail had no horse, no room waiting, no job, no promise that the town would take her in. She had only the road, so she followed it. 2 miles later, Hoofbeats came out of the darkness behind her. Abigail stepped into the brush and crouched low. 1 horse, walking, not running. A rider appeared beneath the moon, tall in the saddle on a black horse nearly invisible against the night. He passed within 20 yards. Abigail could have stayed hidden. Instead, she thought about the wedding. She thought about Abel, and she stood. The horse shied. The stranger's hand moved toward his holster, then stopped when he saw her. "Easy," he murmured to the animal. His eyes came back to Abigail. "Who's there?" "My name is Abigail Owens." Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "I'm walking to Cutter's Creek." The cowboy looked down the empty road behind her, then back at her. "At this hour?" "Yes." He studied her face long enough to notice the fading mark along her cheek. He did not ask who had put it there. Instead, he removed his hat. "Cole Zachary." A pause. Then he swung down from the saddle. Abigail stared at him. "What are you doing?" Cole held out the reins. "You ride. And you? I've got boots. You don't even know me." "No." His voice stayed quiet. "But I know 12 miles is a long road after midnight." Abigail looked at the black horse, then at the stranger. For the first time that day, a man was offering her something without first telling her what she owed him. Slowly, she took the reins. Cole laced his fingers together so Abigail could step into his hands and climb into the saddle. He kept his eyes respectfully lowered while she settled herself, then took the black horse by the bridle and started north. For nearly a mile, neither of them spoke. The moon laid a pale road across the Montana grass. Crickets worked in the dry weeds. Somewhere far off, a coyote called once and went quiet. Abigail finally said, "You always give your horse to women you find beside the road." Cole glanced up. "Can't say it's happened before." The answer almost pulled a smile from her. "Almost." "My father arranged a marriage," she said after another stretch of silence. "I didn't agree to it." Cole kept walking. "To Jeremiah Wilson." That made him look up, only for a second. "You know him?" "I know the name." There was something behind the answer, but Abigail had spent enough of her life having questions forced on her. She let his silence remain his. "My father will come after me." Cole's gaze moved briefly to the mark on her cheek. "He do that?" Abigail touched it without meaning to. She lowered her hand. "Yes." Cole looked back toward the road. A man who needs his hands to make a woman agree with him isn't much of a man. There was no grand promise in his voice, no claim that he would fix anything. Abigail found that easier to trust. Cutter's Creek appeared near dawn, a crooked line of wooden buildings beneath a paling sky. Cole stopped before a two-story boarding house with a narrow porch and a lantern burning behind the front window. "Marner's lodging house," he said. "Mrs. Marner runs it. Room's cheap, food's decent. I have $3.40. That'll get you started." He helped her down. "Ruth Packard owns the dry goods store on the East End. Tell her Cole Zachary said you're looking for honest work." Abigail studied him. "Why? Why what? Why are you helping me?" For the first time, Cole looked away. "Because somebody I knew once needed help." He adjusted the reins. Nobody came. Before Abigail could ask more, the boarding house door opened. Mrs. Marner stood there in a wrapper, with silver hair pinned loosely behind her head. Her sharp eyes moved from Abigail to Cole, then stopped. "Cole Zachary." Something in her voice made Abigail turn. Not welcome, recognition. Cole only touched his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Marner." The older woman looked at him another second before opening the door wider. "You hungry?" she asked Abigail. "Yes, ma'am." "Then come inside." When Abigail looked back from the doorway, Cole was already leading the black horse toward the livery. Mrs. Marner watched him go. "You know him?" Abigail asked. "I know enough." That was all she said. By 7 the next morning, Abigail was standing inside Ruth Packard's dry goods with her hair pinned back and her remaining coins knotted into her handkerchief. Ruth Packard was in her mid-50s, square-shouldered and practical, with spectacles hanging from a cord around her neck. "Cole sent you?" "He told me you might need help." Ruth looked at Abigail's cheek, then deliberately looked away from it. "You count change?" "Yes." "Read?" "Yes." "Lift grain?" "I can." Ruth pointed toward a 50-pound sack beside the counter. Abigail stared at it. Ruth waited. Abigail bent, found her balance, and wrestled the sack onto the low platform scale without dropping it. Ruth's mouth twitched. "Good enough. $1.75 a week, meals on working days. You steal from me, you're gone. You lie to me, probably gone. You work honest, I'll pay honest." Abigail swallowed. "When do I start?" Ruth handed her an apron. "You already did." The first coins Abigail earned felt different in her palm. They were not much, but Abel had never touched them. 3 days passed. She learned the flour bins, the account ledger, the tobacco cabinet, and the floorboard near the front counter that squeaked whenever someone heavy stepped on it. She also learned that Cutter's Creek talked. "Zachary's buying land," one customer told another, while Abigail stacked canned peaches. "North Ridge? 40 acres according to Jim Heller." Abigail's hand stopped, only for a moment. Cole had said he was passing through. That afternoon, a black horse crossed the window. Her eyes followed it before she could stop herself. Cole came in for coffee beans and lamp oil. "You settling here?" she asked. He placed 2 coins on the counter. "Thinking about it." "What changed?" His eyes met hers. Neither spoke. Ruth loudly rearranged something in the back room. Cole picked up his parcel. "I'll let you know when I figure that out." He left. Abigail watched the door close. 2 mornings later, the sound of horses stopped outside. 4 of them. Her body recognized the danger before her eyes did. Abel Owens rode past the window. Jeremiah Wilson was beside him. 2 hired men followed. Abigail dropped behind the counter. Outside, Abel's voice carried along the boardwalk. My daughter's confused. I'm taking her home where she's safe. Safe. The word turned cold inside. Ruth appeared from the storeroom, saw Abigail crouched there and reached behind the flour sacks. Her hand came back holding a shotgun. Back door, Ruth said. Abigail ran. She stepped into the alley and nearly collided with someone. Cole stood against the opposite wall. That's him, he asked. My father. And Wilson? With him. Abigail pressed both palms against her skirt. I thought I had more time. Cole watched her carefully. You want to run or stand? She stared at him. If I run, he'll come again. Probably. And if I stand? It happens here, in daylight, with witnesses. He paused. Your call, Abigail, not mine. Her fingers found the locket beneath her dress. I'll stand. They walked onto Main Street together. Abel saw her immediately. You're coming home. No. Jeremiah stepped forward. Your father and I have an agreement. I don't. Ruth came onto the boardwalk behind Abigail. She has a job, Ruth said. She pays for her room. She earns her meals. Whatever authority you imagine you have ends before my front step. People were stopping now, a blacksmith, 2 ranch hands. Mrs. Harlan from the bakery. Abel noticed them. His voice dropped. Abigail, come home. No. His face hardened. You will do what I tell you, or what? The words seemed to stop the whole street. Abel raised his hand. Cole moved once. He caught Abel's wrist before it reached Abigail. No punch, no spectacle. Just a cowboy standing perfectly still between them. No, Cole said. Abel tried to pull free. Cole released him only after Abel lowered his arm. Jeremiah stared at Cole. Who are you? Cole turned his head. Cole Zachary. Jeremiah's expression changed. The confidence drained from it so quickly Abigail nearly missed it. I know that name. Cole's eyes stayed on him. I know you do. Jeremiah said nothing more. A moment later he touched Abel's shoulder. Not here. Abel looked around at the watching town, then back at Abigail. This isn't done. He mounted. The 4 riders turned south. Abigail stood in the dust and watched them leave. Beside her, Cole said nothing, but Jeremiah Wilson had looked afraid, and Abigail knew enough about frightened men to understand one thing. Whatever Cole Zachary had carried into Cutter's Creek from his past, Jeremiah already knew exactly how dangerous it could become. Abigail thought about that for most of the afternoon. Ruth would not let her return to work. You've stacked the same coffee tins twice, she said. Go somewhere your hands don't have anything to prove. Then she wrapped a piece of cornbread in cloth and pushed it across the counter. Abigail walked north until the storefronts thinned and the road bent toward the creek. The water was low from the summer heat, moving slow between exposed stones. Cottonwood leaves turned silver whenever the breeze reached them. She sat on a flat rock and ate without tasting much. Cole came sometime later. She heard his boots in the dry grass before she saw him. He stopped several feet away. Mind? Abigail shook her head. He sat on another rock. For a while, neither spoke. The silence bothered her less than it should have. That realization bothered her more. Finally, she said, Why did Jeremiah know your name? Cole rested his forearms on his knees. I worked freight out of Denver, Holt Garrity's operation. For how long? 4 years. Foreman most of that. She waited. Cole picked up a small stone and rolled it once between his fingers. Garrity moved legitimate loads, tools, Dry goods, machinery. Then some of the cargo changed. Changed how? Enough that I stopped asking what it was called and started asking why men were willing to kill over it. Abigail looked at him. One man died during a transfer in the winter of '79. Jeremiah was involved. He did business with Garrity. Cole tossed the stone into the creek. I found out more than I was meant to. I left. Made sure part of their operation couldn't continue. You turned them in? Some of them. The answer carried weight. Abigail did not press him. After a while, Cole said, "You've been running since you left that window." She stiffened. I had reason. I know. He looked at her then. What are you running toward? The question caught her harder than anything Abel had shouted. She stared at the water. I don't know. Cole said nothing. That gave her room to try again. I want to make my own decisions. A pause. I want wages with my own name beside them. I want something I've built with my hands. I want to wake up one morning and not listen for somebody else's mood before I decide what kind of day I'm allowed to have. Cole nodded. That's something. She gave him a sideways look. That's all? Seems like a good start. The next morning he met her at the north edge of town with the black horse and a dun mare borrowed from Jim Heller. They rode toward North Ridge before the heat came up. The land opened beyond the ridge into 40 dry acres cut by a narrow creek and a stand of cottonwoods. Mountains sat blue in the distance. Cole pointed with one gloved hand. House would sit there, higher ground. Creek floods in spring, but not that far. He showed her where the wind broke, where a garden might hold, where cattle could be wintered. Abigail asked about the well, then lumber, then how much fencing 40 acres would take. Cole answered every question directly. No smile at her expense. No surprise that she asked. She noticed the marked foundation area was larger than a lone cowboy needed. Cole noticed her noticing. Neither said anything. On the ride back, she asked, You're staying? Yes. You said you were passing through. I was. What changed? Cole looked ahead. Found reasons not to. The answer stayed between them all the way into town. Ruth was waiting at the store door. She held a thick envelope sealed with wax. Sheriff brought it. Abigail opened it at the counter. The first line made her stomach tighten. Jeremiah Wilson had filed a civil petition. His attorney claimed Abel had entered into a binding betrothal arrangement while Abigail was living under his roof. Jeremiah sought damages and legal enforcement based on money and property already committed under that agreement. He can't force you to marry him, Ruth said. No, Abigail kept reading. But he can make fighting him expensive. Cole took the paper when she handed it over. Who's the lawyer? Aldous Prentice. Ruth cursed softly. That afternoon, Jeremiah walked into the store alone. He carried his hat in both hands and wore the same patient expression he'd worn at supper. Abigail, we can settle this quietly. You filed against me. I protected an agreement. My father owes you that badly? Jeremiah's eyes changed. Barely. Abigail saw it. She leaned forward. No, her voice lowered. He doesn't owe you. Jeremiah said nothing. What does he know? His mouth tightened. Abigail felt the pieces shifting. Withdraw the petition. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong. He didn't. She held his gaze. Withdraw it, or I find out what Abel Owens is holding over you. For 1 second, Jeremiah Wilson lost his polished calm. Then it returned. You're not what I expected. No, Abigail said. I'm not. He left. Cole came after sundown. Ruth locked the door behind him. He stood at the counter with both hands resting on the wood. I've been asking questions since I got here. Abigail waited. Your father hauled freight for Garrity in the winter of 1879. The room went still. He was there the night that man died. Abigail's fingers closed around the edge of the counter. Jeremiah? Connected to the shipment. Cole's voice stayed low. Abel saw enough to hurt him. Jeremiah paid to keep it quiet. Abigail looked toward the dark window. The marriage, the pressure, the careful smiles. It rearranged itself all at once. She had never been the bride. She had been part of the bargain, the price of silence. Abigail turned back to Cole. I want everything you know. He watched her for a moment. You sure? Yes. They talked until after midnight. By dawn, 2 letters lay on Ruth's counter. One contested Jeremiah's petition. The other was addressed to the Territorial Marshal's office in Helena. Ruth read the second envelope and looked at Abigail. You put your name on this. There may be no going back. Abigail pressed the seal closed. I already went back once in my head. She looked toward the east window, where morning light had begun to show. I won't do it again. The words had barely settled when the front window exploded inward. Glass struck the floor in a hard rush. A stone rolled beneath the counter and stopped against a flour sack. Ruth was already reaching for the shotgun. Abigail stood behind the counter, pulse hammering, while 3 riders waited in the pale morning street. The man in front called through the broken frame. Mr. Wilson says you ought to think carefully before sending any mail today. Ruth stepped into view with the shotgun resting against her shoulder. Yeah, you boys have delivered your message. Her voice was flat. Now deliver yourselves somewhere else. The rider looked at the gun, then at Ruth. He turned his horse. The others followed. Abigail waited until the hoofbeats faded. They're watching the post office. Seems that way. Ruth lowered the shotgun. Abigail looked at the sealed letters. I still want them sent. The door opened less than 5 minutes later. Cole came in fast, took in the broken window, then looked at Abigail. You hurt? No. His eyes stayed on her another second before he examined the stone. They know about Helena. They know enough. Abigail handed him the letters. We can't use the regular post. Cole nodded once. I know a rider. Who? Man named Caleb Hart. Runs horses between here and Fort Benton when freight gets delayed. He owes me a favor. You trust him? With these. He tucked the letters inside his coat. I'll have him on the Helena Road within the hour. Abigail touched his sleeve before he turned. Cole stopped. Thank you. He looked down at her hand, then back at her. No debt attached. She understood why he said it. That mattered more than she wanted to admit. 40 minutes later, Sheriff Doyle walked into the store carrying another folded notice. He removed his hat. Miss Owens. Abigail saw the apology in his face before he spoke. Emergency hearing. Judge Harold Fenner's riding in from Harkin County. When? Day after tomorrow. Ruth swore under her breath. Jeremiah's attorney is Aldous Prentice, Doyle continued. He's asked the court to hear the petition here. Abigail looked at the broken window. 2 days, a rich rancher, an experienced lawyer, and everything she owned could still fit inside one small room at Mrs. Marner's. That evening, Cole found her sitting alone behind Ruth's store with the hearing notice folded in her lap. I can pay for counsel, he said. No. The answer came too quickly. Cole leaned against the wall. Loan, then? No. Abigail. She looked at him sharply. I spent my whole life learning that when a man gives you something, he eventually tells you what it cost. Cole absorbed that without flinching. Then he said, all right. She had expected an argument. He didn't give her one. After a moment he added, but accepting help doesn't make the road less yours. Abigail looked down at the paper. The sentence stayed with her. The following morning, Cole came to the store carrying a folded statement. George Tullis, he said. Abigail looked up. Who? One of Garrity's men. He saw what happened after the freight transfer in '79. He's been in Billings the past 2 years. You found him? I've been looking since I got here. Cole set the paper on the counter. He finally agreed to put his name to it. Abigail reached for the statement. Cole covered it lightly with 2 fingers. Not yet. She looked at him. Read it when you need it. Then he left. By 8 the next morning, Sheriff Doyle's office was packed. Judge Fenner sat behind a heavy desk near the rear wall. Gray-haired, lean, expression unreadable. Jeremiah sat beside Aldous Prentice, who had a leather case filled with documents. Ruth sat directly behind Abigail. Cole was nowhere in the room. Abigail noticed. She made herself stop noticing. Prentice began calmly. He produced Abel's signed agreement. Letters between Abel and Jeremiah. Receipts showing property preparations Jeremiah claimed had been made in expectation of marriage. He spoke of obligation and dependency and financial damage. Abigail answered each point. I never signed anything. She kept her hands flat on the table. I was 23 when that agreement was made. My father did not have my consent. Prentice smiled faintly. You lived under his roof. I worked under his roof. The room shifted. Then Abel Owens arrived. He stood along the wall for several minutes before Prentice called him. Abel took the witness chair and changed. His voice softened, his shoulders lowered. He spoke like a tired father. My daughter has always been strong-willed. Her mother's death affected her deeply. I fear strangers have encouraged her to act without understanding what's best for her. Abigail stared at him. She had seen this version before, not at home, never at home, only in public. Judge Fenner finally turned to her. You may question your father. Abigail rose. Her knees felt unsteady. Then she remembered the folded statement. She opened it. 3 paragraphs, 1 number. $340. She read it twice, then looked at Abel. Do you know George Tullis? Her father's face did not move. That was the answer. I've known many men. George Tullis of Billings, winter of 1879. Prentice stood. Your Honor, relevance. Sit down for the moment, Mr. Prentice, Fenner said. Abigail kept her eyes on Abel. Did you haul freight for Holt Garrity? Silence. Occasionally. Was Jeremiah Wilson present during a freight transfer in which a man died? Abel's jaw tightened. I don't remember. Did Jeremiah Wilson pay you $340 afterward? This time the room reacted. A chair creaked. Somebody whispered. Abel looked at Jeremiah. Only once. Abigail saw it. So you do remember. Prentice was on his feet again. Your Honor, Abigail held up the statement. George Tullis remembers. Judge Fenner took the paper. He read it slowly. Jeremiah had gone pale. Then the sheriff's office door opened. Cole stood there. Dust covered his coat. Beside him was a rider Abigail had never seen, exhausted and red-eyed from the trail. Behind them came a woman wearing a territorial marshal's deputy badge. "Margaret Voss," she said. She placed a packet of papers before Judge Fenner. The marshal's office received information concerning the Garrity freight operation. Jeremiah Wilson's name was already connected to an active investigation before Miss Owen's letter reached us. Nobody moved. Jeremiah looked at Prentice, then at Abel, then at Abigail. For the first time, he no longer looked like a man negotiating. He looked like a man measuring how much of his life might collapse if he kept speaking. He stood. "I withdraw the petition." Prentice turned toward him. "Mr. Wilson, I said I withdraw it." Judge Fenner looked at Jeremiah for a long moment. "Unconditionally? Yes. The petition is dismissed." The words were simple. The silence afterward was not. People began leaving slowly. Ruth squeezed Abigail's shoulder once and walked outside. Deputy Voss began speaking with Sheriff Doyle. Abel stood beside his horse across the street, his hat in his hands. Abigail looked at him. Winning had not erased anything. Not the kitchen, not the window, not 9 years. Cole came to stand beside her. "You all right?" Abigail watched her father turn toward the road. "I don't know yet." Cole did not tell her how she ought to feel. He simply stayed. And for the first time since Abigail had stepped through that bedroom window, there was no one immediately chasing her. The quiet should have felt like victory. Instead, standing beside Cole in the bright Montana morning, Abigail realized the harder question was only beginning. Who was she when survival was no longer the only thing she knew how to do? Abigail did not have an answer. For the first week after the hearing, she worked as if one might be hidden somewhere between Ruth Packard's flour invoices and the tobacco ledger. She swept twice in the morning, counted lamp chimneys that had already been counted, rearranged the salt shelf so often that Ruth finally stood beside it with both hands on her hips. "You know that salt isn't going anywhere." Abigail looked at the shelves. "I know." "Then quit chasing it." Abigail almost smiled. Outside, Cutter's Creek had returned to ordinary life. Wagon wheels rattled across Main Street. Men argued over cattle prices. Mrs. Harlan burned a batch of biscuits and blamed the oven. Jeremiah Wilson had left town under the attention of Deputy Margaret Voss. Word came later that the territorial authorities had formally opened proceedings connected to the Garrity freight operation. Abel had been ordered to Helena as a material witness. Abigail read that part twice when the notice reached Ruth's store. She folded the paper. Cole was standing near the counter. "He may have to answer for more than the payment," he said. Abigail slipped the notice into her apron pocket. "He made his choices." She looked at Cole. "I made mine." That was all she wanted to say about her father. Cole accepted it. He always seemed to know when silence was not emptiness but a boundary. For days he did not ask Abigail to come to North Ridge. He simply rode north every morning with an axe tied behind the saddle and came back after dark with sawdust on his shirt. Finally, Ruth said, "He's been clearing that property from sunrise to supper." Abigail kept writing figures in the ledger. "He owns it." "That wasn't my point." "I know." Ruth leaned over the counter. "He hasn't come in here once asking what you plan to do about him." Abigail put down the pencil. "I noticed." "Then maybe notice it somewhere besides my store." The next morning, Abigail borrowed the dun mare from Jim Heller and rode north. She heard Cole's axe before she saw him. He had cleared the brush around the foundation site and driven stakes into the earth. Fresh-cut pine lay in neat stacks beside a tool chest. Beyond him, The cottonwoods moved in the breeze, their leaves flashing pale green and silver. Cole set the axe down when he saw her. "Morning." "Morning." Abigail dismounted. She walked the marked corners of the house. It was still larger than one man needed. She stopped near the eastern wall. "I need to say something." Cole waited. "I'm not going from my father's house into another man's life and calling that freedom." "I know. I mean it." "So do I." She looked at him. "I intend to keep working for Ruth. Thomas Caldwell may help me pursue a civil claim against Jeremiah and my father over that agreement. It could take months." "All right. I don't know what I'll be like when I'm not fighting somebody." Cole's expression softened. "I've got time." Abigail looked away toward the ridge. "I'm still angry." "I'd be surprised if you weren't. You aren't going to tell me to forgive him?" "No." "Why not?" "Because that's yours to decide too." The answer landed quietly. She looked back at him. "I don't entirely know who I am yet." Cole took one step closer, but no more. "I know one thing." "What?" "Someone worth knowing." A pause. "For the long term." Abigail's throat tightened. No kiss followed. No proposal. Cole simply picked up his axe again. And somehow that made her trust the moment more. Thomas Caldwell arrived from Denver 9 days later. He was a middle-aged attorney with trail dust on his coat and careful habits. He laid out the possibility of a civil claim based on the coercive agreement, the money exchanged, and Jeremiah's attempt to use the courts against her. "It will not be quick," he warned. Abigail looked at the documents. "Good things don't seem to be." She signed. The case lasted 4 months. There were hearings, affidavits, delays, and weeks when nothing happened at all. Abigail kept working. On Sundays, she rode to North Ridge. Cole taught her how to square a frame with a carpenter's square and chalk line. She taught him that his supply accounts were a disaster. "You paid 12 cents too much for these nails." "They're nails. They're 12 cents. He stared at her. She stared back. Then he handed her the ledger. They learned how to disagree without fear. That may have been the most important thing either of them built. In late October, Thomas Caldwell rode into Cutter's Creek, carrying the judgment. Abigail won the central claim. The damages were modest. Enough for savings, enough for security, not enough to change who she was. She preferred it that way. By early spring of 1884, the North Ridge house stood finished. A modest place of pine and stone with a roof built against Montana wind, a front door facing east, and a kitchen window that caught the first light of morning. The porch steps leaned slightly on one side. Abigail had set them wrong the first time. She had rebuilt them. They still weren't perfect. She loved them anyway. On the Saturday she left Marner's lodging house, everything she owned fit into 2 bags and a cedar box. Inside the box she placed her judgment papers. Around her neck she wore her mother's locket. Cole waited at North Ridge. His black horse grazed beside the new fence. Abigail carried her things into the main room and stopped. Morning light poured through the east window. Her window. The one she'd measured herself. Cole stood several feet behind her. He did not tell her the house was hers. He did not tell her she belonged there. After a while, he said quietly, "Come home with me." Abigail turned. Months earlier, those words would have frightened her. Home had meant rules. Home had meant watching a man's hands. Home had meant listening for boots before deciding whether it was safe to breathe. This was different. Cole held out his hand, not taking, offering. Abigail looked at it, then at him. I can leave if I ever need to. Yes. I can keep working. Yes. I can disagree with you. His mouth moved. I've already noticed. She laughed. Then she placed her hand in his. I love you, Cole. For once he had no quick answer. His eyes lowered for a moment, as though the words had reached somewhere he kept guarded. Then he looked at her again. I love you back. A small smile came. Have for a while. Abigail squeezed his hand. Outside, the cottonwoods were beginning to green. Spring wind moved across 40 acres of open Montana ground. She turned toward the east window. Once, she had climbed through a window into darkness with $3.40 in her pocket because staying would have cost her more than leaving. Now she stood behind another window she had helped build. The morning spread gold across the floorboards. Cole stood beside her. Not ahead, not over her. Beside her. Abigail did not look south toward the Owens ranch. She didn't need to. For the first time in her life, home was not the place someone had ordered her to remain. It was the place she had freely chosen to stay. And maybe that was the greatest distance Abigail ever traveled. Not the 12 miles through the Montana darkness, but the distance between being told where she belonged and finally choosing it for herself. Imagine standing where she stood. Imagine carrying years of fear so quietly that even peace feels unfamiliar. Then imagine discovering that real love doesn't tighten its grip when you're afraid to leave. It opens its hand and lets you decide whether to stay. Cole never gave Abigail her strength. That strength was already hers. He simply loved her without asking her to become smaller so he could feel bigger. And sometimes, that is what healing looks like. Not forgetting what happened, not pretending the scars never existed, but finding someone willing to walk beside you while you build something better. Maybe that's why the little house facing east mattered so much. One window had carried Abigail into darkness, another welcomed the morning. And between those two windows stood a woman who had finally learned that home wasn't where fear kept you. Home was where your dignity could breathe. If you've ever had to walk away from something painful to discover what your life could become, tell me in the comments what this story meant to you. And if you'd like to stay with us, subscribe. There are more stories ahead. Stories of frontier love, hidden courage, second chances, and wounded hearts finding their way toward the light.